while we're dropping in, I just wanted to introduce and welcome our very esteemed guests, um, Marie Davis and Shawanda Roberts. They're killing it. They're out there in corporate America doing what they do. And they're here to talk to us about how to navigate salary and career in recognition of Black Women's Equal Pay Day. I have a few slides here that I want to share with you guys just to kind of set the tone. But before I do, I'm going to hand it over to Marie and Shawanda to do introduction for themselves. Shawanda, would you like to go first?
Okay. All right.
right.
Well, welcome everyone. I am so glad that you're here. My name is Shawanda Roberts, and I am a Global Vice President of Sales and Marketing Activation at Frost & Sullivan, which is a global growth strategy consulting firm. I have actually been in what I would call B2B sales, professional sales for about 16 years. I started out as an account executive and worked my way up to where I am right now. One of my biggest things is, helping to close the gender gap and first of all, get a lot more women into B2B sales, but not only get them there, also get them into leadership as well. So the biggest things for me is to make sure that I am always inspiring, informing, and impacting those that are around me, and helping them with their growth strategies. So that's me in a nutshell, and I'll turn it over to Marie.
Welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Delighted to be here, guys. By title, I should say Marie Davis, by title, Regional Vice President of Customer Success for Outreach. I have been in the tech space for the last 20 plus years. Began my career in contact centers, worked for companies like the Home Depot, Cigna Healthcare, worked for the Hartford Insurance Group, and transitioned kind of my call center expertise into actually providing tech solutions for contact centers. Worked at NICE inContact for 14 years in a variety of roles, specifically around caring and feeding for our largest, most strategic and global customers. That in turn today is now what we call customer success in some form. So I've been doing customer success before it was customer success. In terms of kind of the things that a little bit about kind of who I am as a human, I always try to lead with the human. I'm a washed up athlete. I played basketball and ran track for many years. So a lot of my perspective in life kind of comes from the discipline and the rigor that I learned early from playing sports, right? I believe in winning. I like to win. It feels good to win. I put in the work to win, right? So I'm super competitive and collaborative by nature. But I also know how to lose, right? I know how to take the lessons away from loss and build a plan so that I don't have to feel it often. I also enjoy travel a great deal. I believe that you learn so much when you see the world and you meet people from different paths of life. So I travel a good bit. I eat a lot of food. I drink a lot of good wine. I listen to a lot of good music and just soak up the culture of the world. So that's a little bit about kind of who I am as a human being.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much. We're so appreciative for your time. Thank you for sharing that with us and the insight and wisdom that you're going to share. Today, we are here to talk about Black Women's Equal Pay Day. And in case anybody just needs to level set in the room, that is the day that recognizes when a Black woman earns the same amount that a white non-Hispanic male would have earned in the 12 months of the previous year. And so September 21st, that is the day that pay became equal well into the next year. Okay. And so there is a obvious pay disparity. And maybe like even before we get into the content, I just want to kind of understand, both of you have been in B2B tech sales. Is that a career or occupation that you see a lot of Black women entering into? I know I giggled a little bit because I'm like, I know the answer.
Not at all.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Yep. And I just want to be clear. Sales Hacker is a sales community. We have a lot of messaging tailored for sales. This conversation isn't just for sales. But I think this is definitely the information that you're going to share today It's applicable to anybody in any occupation, but definitely for sales, I want to make sure that we put a lens to that because it isn't a career path that I think that it could be very beneficial for us to widen the playing field a little bit. So before we get into too much, I'm going to share my screen and just share a few stats here. Okay. And just by maybe a show of hands, were you aware that this day, Black Women's Equal Pay Day, even existed prior to this event? Feel free to drop it in the chat. You guys.
I do not feel alone because I see a lot of no's, and that was me too. So
Yeah, don't feel bad. Like if you didn't know this was a day, just know that, it's a recognized day. Even I think I'm not sure if the White House put out a statement this year, but it's something that I think has gotten a lot of recognition recently. And people are starting to join the conversation a lot more. So thank you for being honest and open about that. I just wanted to share a couple of stats too, but if I can click before we get into it, just so that we, as we think about, this day, and joining the conversation that is starting to pick up some momentum here. Let's think about, the total picture. Black women make up 7% of the total workforce, but account for 12% of minimum wage earners. We are heavily over-indexed, maybe in like retail, healthcare, education. You'll see a lot of Black women in those areas that as you know, probably were hit pretty hard during the pandemic. So while we had seen some traction in that pay gap closing, I think the pandemic has kind of widened it a little bit more. We've also seen that 21% of C-suite leaders are women, only 4% are women of color, and only 1% are Black women. Black women are less likely than white men to say that their managers give them chances to manage people and projects, provide opportunity to showcase their work, or help them navigate organizational politics. Only 26% of Black women said that they have equal access to sponsorship, compared with 32% of white women. And in meetings and other common places, 54% of Black women said that they're the only ones in the room. This poll, I think, is indicative of this last stat here. 53% of Americans are not even aware of the pay gap between Black and white women, or maybe just in general, like the disparity that exists with the intersection of race and gender. So just to give you a little bit more background about Black Women's Equal Pay Day, again, it marks that day that Black women make equal amount of pay as a white male Hispanic from the previous year. It's been recognized for more than a quarter century. The earlier the day comes in the previous or that next year, the closer we get as a nation to achieving pay fairness. But as we've seen in recent years, that date has moved out. And even with the attainment of higher education and Black women owning their own businesses, opening their own businesses, getting into managerial roles, we continue to see that gap widen as education and titles increase. Even a little bit more history, the Equal Pay Act was passed in the 60s. I forget the exact date, but Equal Pay Day began in 1996. Women's Equal Pay Day in 2022 was March 15th. Versus March 24th of 2021. So the good news is women in general, we've seen that pay gap decrease, but we have seen an increase in the pay gap overall for women of color and Black women especially. Black women made 63% of what white non-Hispanic males made. So that's a ratio that is likened to the pay wage gap of the 1960s. So very sobering information, but still information that I think when we take away, we can have those meaningful conversations about the pay disparity and how we can possibly close that gap. The other question is that, a lot of people have kind of bounced around is where do we see that disparity? Are we really comparing apples to apples? And from all the data that I've looked at, and I've been kind of diving deep in preparation of our webinar and for the kind of recognition that we've done internally within our company, the answer is, yep, we see it everywhere, anywhere, across every industry, across every role. That pay gap starts early at age 16. So Black girls at age 16 are paid less than men or males of their same age, and it just widens as we get older. By occupation, you'll see in this chart on the right-hand side, in healthcare and teaching, managerial roles, it's pretty prevalent. I think I even saw stats for surgeons. So it's not, it's no occupation is saved from this. And even in sales, where you would expect it's a pay for performance type of occupation, there even is a disparity there. And as the education level increases, that pay gap actually increases as well. So the gap is about 36% for Black women with bachelor's degrees versus white men with bachelor's degree on average. All of this data can be found on Lean In. They're an organization that focuses on closing that pay gap and helping companies to find ways to close that pay gap. I'm going to stop sharing because I want to make sure that we now get a little reaction from our panels, Shawanda and Marie, looking at these stats, thinking about B2B sales, technology, being in the tech world, what comes to mind? Let us have it.
I'll start. Sadness. I mean, just sadness, because there is, I think someone put it in the chat, Black women are very, very educated. And, we get in these roles and you can definitely see the difference in thought compared to your other counterparts and making organizations better. And it's sad to see that we've got so many Black women that are jumping out of corporate world and turning to entrepreneurship because they feel like that's the only way that they're going to get their worth is through entrepreneurship, which is a great thing because we're changing lives and we're making differences in people's lives. But I pray for the day that it could just be fair and equal across everywhere, everything, right? And not have to look at gender or color to determine your worth for a company. I also would love to see it, I know anyone that works in public sector and, you've got to, even like education where, they've got to put out like actual salaries of what people are making. Hey, let's make everybody do that. Let's have it publicly for everybody. Hey, this is what such and such makes. This is what such and such makes. So that way people really could see, wow, there's a huge gap here. And why are you paying, Marie different than you're paying, Shawanda or whatever. So it's really just sadness. And I think we have to continue to educate, because I will tell you, I was naive to even a gender gap for a long period of time. I would go to work, I would come home, be with my family, I would go to work the next day, and I just felt like, hey, everything's great, everything's grand. But in reality, I had to have someone tell me the same thing. Hey, did you know there's a gender gap, not even just for Black women, but for women overall in this industry? And I was like, what? And so I think if the more and more that we can inform people about that and tell them, hey, do your research, because guess what? The data is out there and numbers don't lie. So do the data, go out there, get it, and then turn around and try to pay it forward. You start informing and educating others to do the same. And I think the more and more we can get people, informed about this, it's going to be a little easier to try to make that change.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like that maybe lack of awareness. We're starting to have these conversations, but I've heard a lot of people say, I didn't even recognize that there was a disparity until my counterparts started telling me, hey, we're getting paid more than you. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I start to think about this, right, I think about it from a few different points of view. I think like Shawanda, I grew up knowing that there was the disparity, hearing that there was a disparity, but as I started to do research, the gravity of it just kind of soaked in. 63% to the dollar, like, 63 cents to the dollar. That's less money for food, for housing, for childcare. If we think about kind of the generational effects, so taking it out of just today and us, right? But we think about how this plays forward for our children and our children's children's. We start to think about things like less income. Income determines where you live. Where you live determines what schools you have access to, which will determine what schools you have access to on a higher education level, which typically determines what companies come to recruit from those schools, and that determines what opportunities you have, which continues to widen and widen and widen the gap. And the impact of this, if we can't figure out together how to better it, my fear is that we will spend a lifetime and many lifetimes thereafter trying to catch up as we look at equality and equity across not just Blacks or women's, but across women, but across kind of all the different groups. Really kind of getting to the root of this is important. I started poking around at a bunch of different stats, and I think the one that was most sobering for me in this realm was the wage gap closing projections by race and ethnicity. So we're not even talking about gender here. In order for, they're predicting that Blacks will likely catch up at the pace that we are moving right now. We will be paid equally by 2369.
Okay.
I mean,
So-
just kind of just
Mark
feel
your
that for a
calendars.
little bit, right? 2369. White non-Hispanic, so likely white women, 2069. Asians, 2041. Hispanics, 2451. I mean, those are, hundreds of years, down the line. And if we, if we can't figure out how to determine our worth, if we can't figure out how to help each other, if we can't figure out how to get more of us at the table, this continues to perpetuate generation after generation after generation. So for me, what this meant, it gave some weight to it, right? It gave me a greater sense of responsibility to make a difference, to do more, and to try and reach back even farther and in greater quantities than I already do today.
Yeah, thank you. That's absolutely right. Those dates make me sad. Those are hundreds of years. So the conversations that we have today are going to have implications for so many years and for so many generations. And you had mentioned, Marie, like just knowing your worth, and take it with a grain of salt. I know my father, he was born in 1923 in Mississippi, so he has a very different perspective. But I grew up hearing him say, you can expect to work twice as hard to get half as much. And he set that expectation. And so I went out and grind, and never even questioned, like, is there a pay gap? Because that's my expectation. What do you think we can do as we prepare for salary negotiations, like knowing your worth? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is do our best to educate ourselves, right? At least take the time to do a little bit of research, but research likely won't give you all the information that you need. I was last evening I had the opportunity to spend some time with the women sales pros folks here in Atlanta, and I started talking to a lot of ladies about this very subject, and one of the things that we committed to doing is having more open dialogue with each other in safe spaces about what we make. Now, not necessarily going to my colleague at work and having that conversation, but maybe having a conversation with Shawanda, so that as I get my next opportunity, I know what an SVP can make, right? Because I have no context of that outside of this particular space, and it gives me at least a foundation to be able to begin negotiations from. So I think the first thing is having open dialogue, not being fearful to talk about money, Not being fearful to kind of share what you know and share some of the tactics that you've learned in terms of gathering information about what others are making in your like fields with folks that are coming behind you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you've, Shawanda, did you want to jump in on
Oh,
the
yeah, no, I
questions?
was just gonna piggyback on that. So,
Mhm.
talking from a salary negotiation, but also from a promotions angle.
Mhm.
So when you get to those merit increases and, you get your salary increase and you're going, that's it? Like, there's something wrong here. And this has happened to me before. I literally had to go back and I had to put all the data behind it. I had to, just like Marie said, go out there and say, okay, well, wait a minute. For this position, this is the average that I'm seeing. And also, let me talk about the responsibilities that you've put on me. Let me talk about all the extra stuff I've done outside of my current job description to make this company better. Therefore, I am asking for an increase of this, right? And you put it out there because, again, the way I always feel about it is I'm in sales and the answer is always no unless you ask, right? So
Yeah.
I go out there and you back it up with data. You then go to the appropriate people and say, listen, I really need someone to take a look at this, and let's have a conversation about it. And in my case, it actually worked in my favor. Now I didn't get the total amount that I wanted, but I got 60% of that amount.
Mm.
But just
Mhm.
think, if I had not even asked the question, it just would have went on, and I just would have been saying, I'm not paid when I'm valued. I'm not paid when I'm valued. Now, granted, I feel I'm valued like $1 million, but and I got to kind of bring that back down. But you got to make sure that you're getting paid what you should for what you're doing. And if you're doing extra stuff on top of that, don't be afraid to put that in there and say, listen, I am doing these 5 extra things that you've asked me to do outside, and I'm rocking it. So
Mhm.
technically, that makes me maybe in the top 10% of your organization, but I'm getting paid at the top, 50%, something like that.
Right.
So just again, don't be afraid to back it up with data and go in there and ask the question. If that's every year you got to do it, then do it every year when
Yeah.
promotion time comes up or when merit increases come up.
Yeah. I got some great advice and I think it's worth sharing here. Is like, those conversations start day one. Don't wait to have that conversation at the year mark. When you have your one-on-ones, when you have those opportunities to bring up, what do you think my strengths are, or have that conversation and help, people verbalize that, make sure that you're doing it early and do it often.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And not,
Yep.
you
I was gonna
mentioned,
say
oh,
I
go
would say
ahead,
the other
please.
thing too, Marcella, is like aligning yourself ideally with people who have done it before, right? Who've been there
Mm-hmm.
before, if at all possible, right? Because there's something to be said for someone helping you navigate. We can all try and figure it out on our own, right?
Yeah.
Or you can get kind of at least a leg in the right direction by someone who's done it before. So don't hesitate to lean into your network, lean into your networks,
Mhm.
like to be able to get the knowledge that you need um, to be able to position yourself better. You,
Absolutely.
you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know it until you ask somebody or figure it out, right? So lean in.
Absolutely. And you've come from diverse backgrounds as well. Like, do you think that this process works as well in B2B tech sales as it does in other areas? Like, going out to your network, asking for salary comparisons. Is that something that, transfers if you're going from like a retail position, executive retail position to an executive B2B position?
I think it should be. Again, I go back to the answer is always no unless you ask.
Yeah.
And I think that's for anything in life, right? And so it's ask the question, do your research behind it, because your research is going to tell you if that question is a valid question to ask or not, to be quite frank with you. Because
Mhm.
if you're looking at all the data and it's showing that the average person makes it from this amount to this amount, but you're asking for this amount, and they come back and tell you no, you may just say, hey, well, you know what, I asked and I'm still getting paid within what I'm seeing is average, from data. I'll stick with it. Or it tells you, you know what, maybe this is not the career choice for me. Maybe I need to look at what other career choices are out there that may be more suited for what I want to do and what I want to get paid based on my worth and my education status and my skill set and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to ask a little bit more about, using your network and maybe getting sponsors and mentors. We've had that conversation a lot internally, and wanted to see how mentorship and sponsorship may have impacted your career and how you navigate it. What would you say, how have you gone about finding a sponsor? What is the criteria, or what do you look for in a mentor? Those types of things. How have they helped you navigate your career?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been critical. My network is a large part of why I'm here, right? I've been blessed to have a lot of amazing people pour into me daily. A lot of them organic, right? For me, a lot of the relationships that I have that pour into me are folks that I've known since I was a teenager, while I was in
Mm,
college, and they've grown and they've taught me what they know. But I think mentorship, coaching, mentorship, and sponsorship, I think, are the three that folks always talk about, right? And I think all three are important. And as your career grows, different ones might impact differently. So you think about kind of early in your career having a coach, someone who's likely done what you've done before, someone who understands your industry, someone who can help you navigate and give you the kind of the tactical tools that you need to do your job and do it better, all the tips and tricks and things that will help you show up and show up well. Super critical early in your career. As you continue to grow in your career, kind of double downing with a mentor, right? Someone who is helping you to strategically navigate,
mhm.
helping you build a career development plan so that you know where you're heading towards and the path that you're going to take to get there. Someone that may or may not be in your field, but in a relevant field, so that they have context to kind of what it will take for you to get to the next levels, right? They likely have insight into things and roles that you're not even thinking about, right? Because they have breadth and depth um, about potential. So I think those folks are very important also. For me, those folks have usually come um, through organically through like my initial mentor. I had a mentor when I was a kid. I was about 13. Someone took a liking to me and said I reminded them of themselves at that
Mm,
age, and they leaned in. And a lot of my mentors from there have come from their network, right? So kind of friends of friends. I've got a few mentors who are old bosses, folks that I used to report into that I've long left their organizations, but they've still chosen to be vested in my career. Um, and then you get a sponsor, right? The sponsor is, especially as you continue to grow, always important. But as you get to the higher levels, especially and the roles are fewer and fewer,
yeah.
the seats at the table are harder and harder to get. That sponsor becomes even more critical, right? Because that sponsor is a person that's talking about you when you're not there. That sponsor is a
Mhm.
person mentioning your name in rooms that you may never have access to, right? They're giving you the keys and the clues to be able to navigate, um, when opportunities are granted, but they're also the individuals that are mentioning your name for opportunities so that opportunities are even offered. So
Mhm.
I think all three are super important. I think how you find them. Uh, for a lot of it for me, I said organic, but the other piece is I found a lot of these folks along the way by giving, right?
Mm,
I found
mhm.
them through boards that I've sat on. I found them through sorority events that I've attended. I found them through coaching basketball for middle school girls, things that I had no kind of benefit to get back, but they were me giving, and people were inspired, and people saw potential in me and chose to lean in. So that's how I've developed my network for my coaches, mentors, sponsors, and that's how I understand each of the roles to be important.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I everything that Marie said is spot on. I think from me being a kid growing up, my mom and my dad, my parents were really my first mentors because they were the ones
Mhm.
pushing me to say, listen, always look to grow. Whatever it is that you do, don't, sit in a job and just say, this is it. Always look to reach, higher. Right.
Yeah.
And so then as I got a little bit older, I had mentors that like she said were my bosses. Until this day, I still go to them. But then I also have what I would call my growth squad. So those are
Mm.
people that are in my network that I can just call on and just say, Marie, I need to talk. Like, I'm at a dilemma right here and I'm not really sure how I should approach it. Am I thinking the right way? Am I not thinking the right way?
Mhm.
And we can just have those candid conversations, to say, hey, go for it, or wait, you might want to think about this before you actually go position, what it is that you want to do. So I think, finding those networks, whether they're on LinkedIn groups, whether they're your church group, whether they're your sorority group, whether they're your best friends from high school that y'all still hang out and y'all still kind of cool group, you never know who you can actually find a mentor in. And I will say that for the very first time about 2 years ago, I finally asked someone, I would love for you to be my mentor. Never
Mm.
had really asked someone. They probably either just tagged themselves as my mentor, and I was like, yeah, she's right. That's my mentor, or he's my mentor. But I never really asked them to do it. They just kind of took me under their wing. But this one, I had been following her for at least a good 2 years. And then I said, I really think she could help me. And I did. But I always felt, well, maybe everyone is asking her. So maybe I shouldn't, ask her because she's going to be too busy. And sure enough, I asked her and she said, I am honored to actually be your mentor. And she has helped me these last 2 years along the way make the right decisions and then basically tell me that, listen, the decisions that you make going forward, you are going to be 100% confident in those decisions because it's based off of the information that you know and you have. And it sunk in. I was like, oh, because I would always make a decision and go, I'm not really 100% sure that I made the right decision there. But, talking to her just really opened up things and it's made me much, much more confident in how I make those decisions and how I move forward. Um, your mentors can also, and even your sponsors can also help you with professional development. So I'm really big at always perfecting my craft. Whatever it is, I always want to continue to perfect my craft. That's why you probably will see me on all kinds of webinars, listening and attending, because I always feel like I can learn something new every day. But those mentors and those sponsors, remember, they have their own networks too. And so it's called making the network, right? And you're using your networks, you're tapping into other people's networks. And that's how you get to know pretty much everyone within either your industry or adjacent industries, because you never know when you can lend a helping hand or either they'll reach out for some help.
That's,
So it's always a win-win.
I love the growth squad.
Yes, my growth
Hashtag
squad.
growth squad. And it's important. Listening to the conversation, it's like, you might find your growth squad in people that you have a lot of commonalities with. Maybe it's church or you hung out together a while or you're in the same sorority. How important is it to have that type of bond versus, looking across looking throughout your organization and finding somebody that might not have any similarities with you? Like, I'm just thinking about, as Black women enter corporate America or they're entering into B2B sales, they might look up that ladder and see that there's a broken rung and not see anybody that they find look like them or would say, you remind me of my younger self. I mean, is it important to say like, okay, I got to find somebody Black woman who's been through what I've been through, who really gets what I'm struggling with? Do you think the
Yeah.
demographics are critical, or is it just like, nope, just find somebody in your court?
So that's actually a hard question to answer for me. And I'm only going to say that because every job that I have been in, I have probably been that 1%
Yeah.
of a Black woman, right? And so the mentor that I attached to when I first came into an organization was a Hispanic woman, but she was very on point, but I also was on point with her. So one of the things that I did first and foremost is I got in there and I learned the ropes and I started doing well. And then I started having conversations with her to say, listen, here are my growth objectives. How can you help me? And she was my immediate boss. And so that was kind of my test to see, is she going to help me? Is she not going to help me? Is she going to sabotage? What is she going to do? So I had to kind of look at behaviors. I had to understand, okay, is she for me? Is she against me? What is she? And sure enough, very quickly, I found out, oh, she's for me. And she kept saying, listen, I need you at the top here with me. I need you to, come do, you're very good at what you do. Let's get you up there. Where do you want to go? Right. And that was the first thing she said to me. And ever since then, it was like, okay, she's for me. I'm going to tread lightly to start off with, but now I'm all in. Right. And so you never really know. It doesn't have to be someone in your same race all the time. You kind of got to play that, and you got to kind of see, you got to feel for if that person is true to you, or if they're just talking the talk and not walking the walk. Like, what are they doing? What are their little things here and there they're doing? And I think you could quickly either say yay or nay, let me go find somebody else. Could even be a man. One of my current bosses now is a white male, but he is very on point with, hey, Shawanda is very good at what she does. We need to actually get her here, or we need to, can she do this? Can she do that? And putting your name in higher and higher with C-level executives. So
Yeah.
it's kind of been all around for me.
Yeah. No, and I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think it's tough too, right? And I think there are pros and cons, right? As a Black woman, would it be ideal to have a Black woman as my mentor, as my coach, as my sponsor? Sure, because she kind of understands the plight. She's walked a similar walk, right? Maybe not the same, but very similar. It's, I use the analogy sometimes it's like trying to explain to a man the childbirthing process, right? You can explain it and they'll get it and they can empathize with the pain of it, but not having experienced it, it's really hard to quite, kind of live it with you. However, having said that, a lot of my mentors have been allies. They've been people who don't look anything like me, who haven't had my experience, who haven't walked the exact same path as me, but they've been people who have chosen to be vested in the greater good, right? Who understand the importance of diversity, who understand the importance of gifting opportunity and giving opportunity, who understand potential, right? And have chosen to invest in it. So, so for me, I've absolutely had and benefited from and mentored people that looked like me and people who didn't look like me, and have been mentored by both also. So I would say definitely don't limit yourself to someone who looks like you. There might not be someone who looks like you in the organization at the levels that you need to be able to leverage them. But know that there are a lot of good-hearted, goodwill, good intended people in this world who are willing to invest in you and take advantage of it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was curious because I know a lot of people might step into a situation and say, like, I got to find somebody who understands my plight, and not trust that there are other people. Like there are people that don't look like you, that aren't your same gender, who are advocating for your success. And so that shouldn't be undermined, and definitely reach out and get those opportunities. It sounds like asking pointedly, hey, will you be my mentor, is the way to go.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
don't
And then
wait, right?
in lieu of understanding, empathy works just fine, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like if they can't experience it with you, being able to empathize with what you've experienced goes a long way, for sure.
Yeah, especially if they've assessed you as a talent and potential and mention your name in the room when you're not around. That's that's important.
Mhm.
Um, you know, let's talk about just a little bit more about knowing your worth. You mentioned just doing your research, and I just wanted to do a check. Are there resources, your like favorite resources of yours that you say like, oh, this is a
Mm.
great place to go data digging, or, besides your network, are there other resources that you would say, hey, go look at Glassdoor? I know that's a that's one people use, but I'm not sure if there's other places that maybe we should take a look at, especially if it's sales related or in any industry, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think the power of Google is always really, really good.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you literally can just type in a question you're asking, and all of a sudden everything is going to come up for you. I know for sales industry, there is it Revs Up? Is that it, Marie? Revs
Mm.
Up? I can't remember. Anyway, they give a lot of salary, um, mid and average, and okay, this is your OTE, this is the typical based on title. And then also looking at job descriptions as well, but then also completely making sure that you understand that if the company, really just can't get there to you from a value perspective in your base salary, what other options do you have? Is there equity stock? Is there there's all other things that can be negotiated into that base salary that's going to help with getting you to your worth, right?
Right.
So I think also looking at those too, it's not necessarily always going to be money that's going to be put into your base salary, but what other things can you negotiate in that total compensation plan that can equal up to what you would feel is your worth?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great point. We hadn't touched on the equity part, but I know, a lot of people, there's been conversations about it because a lot of people would negotiate on days off, for example, but with a lot of
Right.
companies doing flexible PTO, or that's not as big of a component now. But
Right.
that
Yeah.
equity portion definitely is. Now,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think Google told me it's revs up.
Right.
That's it. Revs up. Told you,
Google will
power of
tell you.
Google.
The other thing that I did, and it's super tactical, right? But just going out and finding jobs with the exact same job title in the region that you're looking at. A lot of jobs these days are posting salaries or salary ranges, right? So it gives you a point of reference for what other companies are paying for similar titles. Now you do have to dig a little bit deeper to understand kind of size of the company and industry and all that good jazz, because some of that will play a role, but at least it starts to give you a range for where to start. So I mean, super tactical, but these days with salaries being a more common thing to list, it may at least give you some context.
Yeah, that's really great. That's super helpful. I know that now going out and actually interviewing for these jobs might be a little tempting. Let's say, for instance, you're the top performer at your company and then you're still not getting anywhere. You go out and do your research and you find like, wow, this is a great offer. When do you know when it's time to actually, start seriously considering other offers, or when it's time to actually go actively look? If you've had those conversations, you're the top performer, you've found a mentor and you're still not getting anywhere. When do you think like it's a good time to, okay, now I need to get serious?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and no one at Outreach is ever leaving because we're the greatest company ever, right? For me, it's when I'm comfortable, right? It's when I feel like I've given kind of the current company, the best that I have to offer, and I've made the impact that I need to make, or the impact that I'm capable of making. Then it's time for me to go, right? Because I think at that point in time, kind of when I've hit that ceiling, then my growth potential is likely stunted. And for me, if I'm not growing, I become complacent. And if I become complacent, then you're not getting the best version of me every day. And I like to wake up every morning and give you the best that I've got. So that's, I mean, in the past, that's when I found myself kind of having to have those real conversations with me. I'm waking up. It's hard. I'm rolling myself down the stairs to get to my office, right?
Right.
I'm dragging into the office. I have no pep. I have no energy. I have no inspiration. Then it's likely time to start looking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that it's not a, you're saying it's not like a hard and fast, like, hey, give it a go for another 6 months. It's like, what do you feel? Like, are you still giving your best self? Right? After you've
Yeah, I
had those
think
conversations.
I think it's also when you feel your growth stops. So
Mhm.
if you are like like she said, you've hit that ceiling, or upper management, is not going to pour into you, is not going to
Yeah.
continue to invest in you. Again, professional development is very, very important because it's not only about attracting, talent, but you got to retain that talent too.
Right.
And so when a company stops trying to retain talent, and your talent is trying to grow and they want to get better at what they're doing to help the organization, then it might be time to start looking elsewhere. I think it's very important also that your direct management knows where you stand with your growth, like what it is that you want to do at that company or in the next 3 years, 5 years, because if they don't know, then there's nothing you can really complain about. I'm not growing. I'm not doing this, because guess what? Your management doesn't even know you want to grow. They think that you're content. Now, a good manager or a good leader should actually be having these conversations with you to ask you, hey, where do you see yourself in 2 years and 3 years? But the reality is, all leadership is not doing that, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you've got to be able to make sure you get in front of them and have those conversations, because it will then also tell you how long you need to stay there. Because if they're not listening, and it's just same old, then it's like, okay, I've had 3 meetings with this person and told them what I wanted to do, and there's no opportunities coming. They're not even trying to groom me to get into those particular roles. So maybe I need to look somewhere else. You know, story for real, this happened actually a few years ago, with a job that I was at. I had gotten a very good offer to move to another position, another company, another position. And so what I did is, they were going to offer me, like, it was basically almost like $100,000 more at this other company. And so what I did, because I liked the company I was working with, and I figured that there may be some growth opportunity, I said, I'm going to give them a chance. So I went to them and I said, listen, I've gotten 2 different offers, which was true. I've had 2 different offers. One's from a major competitor, one is from a non-competitor. But look, this is the salary that they're looking to offer me, and this is the job that they're looking to offer me. So literally, I was going to be doing less work at the new company and getting paid almost $100,000 more, right? And I went to him and I said, listen, my biggest 2 things right now in life, my biggest motivations is growth, and I'm not going to, and money, because this is pretty good. And within about 3 or 4 days, they actually came back with a very lucrative offer to keep me. And so I ended up getting the pay bump that I wanted. I ended up getting the growth that I wanted. And I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to actually stay with the company and continue to learn new skill sets, because that way I'm more marketable when I do decide, that I want to leave the company, which I did end up leaving the company, but I was much more marketable to go to another company, another position, right? And it never hit me, because I was talking to another one of my friends and she said, I applaud you. She says, do you know what you just did? And I said, no, I don't. And she was like, you do what happens behind closed doors with most white men every day in every organization. They go behind closed doors. They automatically give these people their promotions or give them a brand new title, because let's just face it, a lot of times, women are actually hired based on their experience, where men are hired on their potential. Not sure why it's not the same every way, but this happens. And she said, you literally went in there and did what most white men do all the time, and you did it as a Black woman. She said, and your team basically said, you are absolutely right. You are worth this. We're sorry we haven't been, looking at you this way, but we want to keep you here. We can't lose you. And that's what happened. And I said, oh my God, I never thought about it like that. But again, it was the confidence that I had in it to say, you know what, I'm willing to risk, having to leave the company and go figure out this new venture.
Yeah.
But again, it went back to, I got to ask the question.
Yeah.
See where it goes.
I also applaud like that confidence of knowing the value that you bring to the company. I think a lot of times, like I said, work twice as much, get half as much. Maybe sometimes that's instilled too deeply and we don't understand the value that we're bringing. So like owning that swagger, and having that conversation, knowing that you're going to bring that value to the company. I think that's important. And developing that within, your own cohort or yourself. I think that's important as a salary prep to begin with. I know for me, I have like a brag board that I keep that like every project that I do, I make sure I take note of, I did this, I did this, I did this. So I know like, I don't have that imposter syndrome. I can go back and say like, no, I have that experience. This is what I accomplished. And I think, we can encourage that among a lot more Black women just to own that, own their accomplishments.
Agreed.
A lot more. Yeah. Look, I want to make sure we take some time. We've got 5 minutes left and see if, do you have any advice that maybe we can all take away and take back to our orgs of what does leadership, what does an organization need to do in order to help us close this gap together? Like, what do you see the best companies doing, if any?
Shall you?
Go ahead.
I think there are a couple of things, right? And as we think about kind of employers who are leading the way, the basic one is know what your people are getting paid. Like as a leader, as a manager, like take the time. We do it at least formally once or twice a year. Like look at what your folks are making. Look at what the women on your team make versus the men on your team, the people of color versus non-color, Black versus non-Black. Like actually take a moment to assess equity within your span of control. And I would ask companies and employers to do the same, right? And when we find disparities, then do something about it. Use the funds that are available, use the roles that are available, insert whatever tools are available to make the change. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of companies do is kind of wage disclosure, right? Putting salary ranges or salaries out there on job postings, so folks at least know coming in what the job is worth, right? So as you come in, you already have a base. We see a lot of companies really looking at their recruiting process and taking some of the bias out, all of the bias out, right? The other big one is stop asking people kind of what they were making prior to, and using that as leverage to offer less. Those are a few of kind of the best practices that are happening, and I would encourage all of you as you interview, like that's not a question that I answer. What I'm making is not relevant for the role that I'm applying for now, because I'm not applying for the role that I'm currently in. Right. I will say what I want to make or what I think the role is worth or something of the sort, but don't limit yourself by giving folks a starting point, in that negotiation process.
That's really great. Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important to note. Don't think about what you've been making. That's not the role that you're interviewing for. Very important to note.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is having more of C-levels and leadership make sure that they are bringing in, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, right? So belonging is a huge part of that. Talk to your folks. find out what their growth opportunities are, find out how they feel just overall. And I think we just don't do enough of that. I think if most people felt like they belonged at an organization, they would stay longer at that organization. But the bigger, of course, the organization gets, the further away you get from that direct manager and from the C-level executives. And then just like Marie said, do a compensation study at least once a year to benchmark because things change. And I think we saw a ton of that in COVID when COVID hit. And when everyone was remote or when it was hybrid, companies started figuring out that, oh, wow, we actually can still make great money with a hybrid workforce or even with a complete remote workforce, right? So I am now spending less in expenses because they're not in the office, but my revenues are still going up because they're still productive at home, okay? So looking at just, things, what's happening in society that's changing the way that the workforce thinks and also what they want, and catering around that with your current employees and also the new employees that are going to be coming in or the new hires that are coming in is definitely key.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I know as leaders yourselves, you're probably in your own orgs advocating the same thing. So I appreciate that point of view.
Absolutely.
I wanted to make sure I touched base. I hope I didn't miss any other questions. Blair had asked, we already touched on it a bit, but wanted to see if there were any go-to resources or lists for determining pay gaps. I thought of one actually while we were talking. I saw that Zippia is another, I think it might be a recruiting site, but I have seen some stats there, some comparative stats, as well as Glassdoor. But those I know are resources out there that have statistics that do pay scale analysis. If there's any others, I'd love to hear from them, and love for you guys to share it as well in the community so we can keep this conversation going. Did you guys have any others that might come
I
to
can't
mind?
think of any myself, but yeah, I would love to get a list of those too. So if anyone knows anything, please send it my way. I told you I learn new things every day.
Yeah. You know what? And I think because we are a community, we have the sales hacker community and discussion threads. We'd love to continue this conversation. I'll start the conversation in the sales hacker community. Please be sure to take a look and see if there's other resources that you want to add, help us sister out. Let's add to that
Perfect.
list. We're at the top of the hour. We're actually over, and I appreciate your time. I want to be respectful for everyone here and just thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us and your experience. If you have any questions and want to follow up, would it be okay if they contact you on LinkedIn and just follow up with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to join the Sales Hacker community. Listen to our podcast, Revenue Innovators and Sales Hacker podcast. And thank you all for attending.